to guess, it's Attention Pneumothorax. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And you're spending too much time on the internet. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Mission: Impossible - The Final Reckoning.
Ooh, is it the final, though?
Who knows? Listen, if all of the red carpet stuff, which we are going to talk about because you had a first-hand look, is to be believed, the title is The Final Reckoning.
It is the title is certainly the final
That's what
reckoning.
Every actor said on the red carpet when asked if this was the final movie.
But without giving away any spoilers for the movie, welcome to the show, everybody.
Hi, hello.
Do you think this is the final movie?
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Well, I think the door is open.
Yeah.
Yeah. The door. I will say this without spoiling my review. This is a good time to retire. This is a good time for Mission Impossible to retire.
Here's the thing. Every actor felt like they were media trained on the red carpet in every interview I've seen when someone says, this can't be the last one. Oh, no, please don't let it be the last one. And they all say, well, it is called The Final Reckoning.
Sure.
That is so non-committal.
Yeah.
That it's like, that doesn't answer the question.
Yeah.
Because it could be, this could be The Final Reckoning, but there could be Mission: Impossible Joker's Gambit. Or like
Jeremy Renner could finally make a comeback on and take over the franchise.
You never
like he did the Bourne franchise.
Yeah.
You're right. Wanted to share this up front is that I got to go. We were both invited to go along to the to the premiere of the New York City premiere of the film. You unfortunately were unable to make it.
I couldn't go, but you and Will Temper, friend of the show, and Brendan.
No, Nick Parker.
Oh, Nick Parker. Pardon. Yeah. Nick Parker. I get them. They're so alike.
So interchangeable.
Got to go and have a great time hanging out all dang day at Lincoln Center.
Yeah. So we were invited. We got an invite sent to us via iHeartRadio, which thank you very much to Will Temper for hooking us up for that. But it was kind of like a red carpet thing where we were basically in the line for the red carpet. And a couple of things about this that we were like very apprehensive about. Well, at least I was very apprehensive about. Is you had to show up at 3:15 for the movie, and then wait till 8:45. You had to show up at 3:15 for the red carpet, then wait till 8:30 for the movie to start, and then the movie was 3 hours, and it's just a long time.
It's a long time to stand in the sun. There's not really a lot of shade over there.
Not a lot of shade, and like I have a kid. There's things to do. Like a Sunday is not my day. But this was a Sunday, and my wife gave me a Tom Cruise hall pass.
Wow, that's fair.
And I went along. So we true to form, Tom Cruise came out first. By the way, Josh Horowitz was on the red carpet. I briefly said hi to him. He and I exchanged some pleasantries as well. It was fun watching him actually do his thing on the red carpet. He's great at this. But we true to form, Tom Cruise came out immediately. And the Entertainment Tonight reporter was like, look, just want you to let everyone know Tom Cruise is going to walk the line and say hello to every single person here. He will sign every single autograph. He will take every single selfie, photo, whatever. And I thought, well, that's a nice thing to say. But true to his word, he did indeed do that. And I mean, he walked that line for over, I want to say close to 2 hours. Like he just did the whole thing, said hello to everyone, went to every single person, was entirely gracious. I would say in odd way, it felt like meeting the Pope. Like because the
movie Pope.
Yeah, the movie Pope. He's the president of movies.
Yeah.
The entire Mission Impossible franchise is anchored around and has become more and more anchored around Tom Cruise is the savior of all humanity. And then this event is Tom Cruise is the savior of all movies. And he was very nice. When he came, I was like dumbfounded.
Did you say hi, Tom Cruise?
I did. I said, hi, Tom Cruise. I said, thank you for making these movies. He said, hey, and he looked at me and he was like, I had a really great time making these movies. Thanks for watching them. And I was like, well, that was a great interaction. and I was like, I don't know what else to say here. Because I don't like take selfies. I took some video for the podcast, and I don't do autographs or anything like that. Not there's anything wrong with that. I just like I don't.
Well, you don't. You tend to not give them. I've seen people come up to you and you've slapped pens out of people's hands.
I was like, get that.
Absolutely not. So it would be weird if you asked Tom Cruise for an autograph.
Yeah. But here's a couple of cool interactions that actually did happen. Once that happened, Nick and I, just to amuse ourselves, will try to think of things to say to people because we realized they were coming right up to us. Who came up next? Holt McCalley.
Oh yeah,
came up And this was exciting for me because I'm a huge Mindhunter fan.
Yep.
And so I said, I'm going to need another season of Mindhunter. Thank you very much. And he was like, yeah, me too. And then he was like, and I want you to know, and I think this is kind of an exclusive. I don't know if I Googled to see if anyone had been writing about this, but he said David Fincher and Netflix are talking about 2 3-hour movies to finish out that series. I'm not sure what's happening right there, but there is a big conversation going for Mindhunter season 3. And I was like, that's awesome. He got up on the Entertainment Tonight stage and announced that he's also directing his first feature, which is based on a Gabriel Tintori's film, The Star Maker, which came out after Cinema Paradiso.
Cool.
I don't think I've seen The Star Maker. I've seen Legend of 1900, the other Gabriel Tintorino film. And he just seemed like a really nice dude. Issa Morales came out. I didn't say anything to him, but I just noted very loudly to everyone around me. I was like, that man is unreasonably handsome. He is just unreasonably good looking. And then Nick Parker, I'm sorry, I was shouting out Nick on this one, but Nick was like, he wanted to say something to Nick Offerman because he loves Nick Offerman. And he is building stuff right now. And so he was like, I want to ask Nick Offerman what wood I should use to build my credenza. And then I don't think it's a thing to say this, apologies, Nick, if I'm blowing up your spot, because I'll share another story where I fell over. But Nick was like, when Nick Offerman came around, Nick kind of like, I can't do it. I just can't do it. And so I did it. I was like, Nick, what wood should I use to build my credenza? And I swear to you, Nick Offerman, he like looked up from the autographs he was signing and stared at me, and he was like, well, where do you live, man? And I was like, in New York. And he was like, and then I was like, oh no, he really wants to get into this. Like, he really wants to talk about what wood. And he was like, well, in the state that you're living, I think you really want to aim for the cherry woods. And what kind of credenza are you building here? And he was just like, he just kept, and I was like, oh God, I don't know anything about credenza. I just thought I was being funny, but he really wanted to get into credenzas. So that was fun. I tried to, make a Kaiser Soze joke to Christopher McQuarrie, who wrote The Usual Suspects.
Sure.
Fell flat on his face. He just looked at me and was like, enjoy the movie, and walked on. And I was like, yep, that didn't land.
No.
But it was fun. It was really fun. Got to see the movie at 8:30. I didn't see this because we didn't get to go see it in IMAX. But Tom Cruise went up and talked to everyone that was working in the IMAX theater. He, did some speeches there. It is kind of like meeting the Pope, but he does genuinely seem to appreciate and understand that even after 40 plus years of superstardom, as far as he's concerned, he still seems to have an understanding that what's appreciated by people is one-on-one interactions, and he's very good at it.
Yeah.
And he's devastatingly charming.
Did you meet Simon Pegg?
He was there. I didn't say anything to Simon Pegg, but he stood right in front of me. Looks great.
Did you meet Haley Atwell?
She was there, stood right in front of me. All of them stood right in front of us.
Ving Rhames?
Ving Rhames was not there. So he didn't get to talk to Ving Rhames. Palm Clementoff was there, and she looked luminous, as did Haley Atwell. They looked great, as did Angela Bassett.
Henry Cerny?
Yes, Henry Cerny came out, and it was and I was like,
Kittredge!
But he was lovely, and also Rolf Saxon, who plays the programmer.
Oh yeah,
came out as well and got to chat.
Last one.
Sure.
Tremel Tillman.
Yes. Mr. Melchick was there, and he again, radiant movie star. Yeah, just absolute movie star. All of these guys.
Sounds like a good time. I was super jelly that I didn't get to go, but it's nice to hear that it went well.
If you go to our Instagram page, I posted a bunch of the videos that we had at the time as well, if you wanted to see some of those. But it was fun. And again, thanks to Will Temper, thanks to iHeartRadio for sending us along.
Yeah. All right, let's do some emails before we talk about what is The Final Reckoning, the title of the film that we are going to be talking about today.
Thank you, everyone who emailed us in at Only Movie Podcast. We're getting a bunch of emails.
Onlymoviepodcast at gmail.com.
We're getting a bunch of emails about our top 10, or our movie of the decade episode. Remember, the battle is between the Cap from Flow and Thanos from Infinity War. Who will win? Who will hold out the decade?
You never know.
We've got a couple of quick responses to that here. But first, Prashant writes to us about Sinners. Just caught up with your episode on Sinners, and I loved how all three of you on that podcast loved the film. Stephen Roberts was a guest with us on that show.
Yes.
I've been waiting for a movie like Sinners ever since my professor gave a lecture titled Money, Love, Mojo, which spoke about the politics of blues music and its relationship with capitalism and the occult. I really appreciated how your discussion in the episode reflected these concerns, including a reference to Zora Neale Hurston's work here. I've only read one of her novels, Their Eyes Were Watching God, but Hurston is a phenomenal anthropologist who's been neglected in the scholarly canon for decades, which again speaks to the themes of the films. Speaking of, have either of you read White Tears by Haru Kanzuru? It was a 2017 novel that deals with race, capitalism, and white appropriation of black art, and also the occult supernatural. Highly recommend about it. And then this will go into some details for sinners. It's been out for a few weeks now, so it's a little bit of information here, but nothing too serious, spoiler-wise. I've been thinking about the Irish, or specifically the Irish-American identity of Remick in the film. Have either of you been following the news around Kneecap and their pro-Palestine, anti-Zionist message? I was curious if Coogler intentionally made Remick code switch between his Irish and Southern affectations, and if so, how it relates to the assimilation and racialization of Irish Americans, and whether this plays a part in how Irish Americans and the Irish deal with the history of and violence of colonialism. I feel this might shape how these two groups relate to each other, oppressed groups, whether through solidarity or co-option. I think that's an excellent observation of that film. I got to see it a second time in IMAX just a couple of weeks ago. And in the second viewing, I think it's interesting how the prologue of the film really sets out the three minority groups that have been affected by both colonization and vampirism in the film. I don't think that's
I don't think so.
It's on the posters. And I am actually really looking forward to seeing Kneecap, specifically because I think Sharon Osbourne has been tweeting about Kneecap should be losing their place in their live concerts because of their pro-Palestine message. So that's interesting to me that I would see that. I have not read White Tears, but I've been reading about another anthropologist. And Prashant, you are the person I wanted to ask about this, because there is a book by Alison Davies, I believe, called Deep South, that I've been wanting to read. I just, again, finding out about Zora Neale Hurston was like a new thing to me. And then since then, I read about Alison Davies and his wife's work in the Deep South, where they basically spent 2 years, they're two African-American academics who spent 2 years in the Deep South and then wrote like a 500-page textbook on their experiences there. So that is one I'm actually looking forward to.
Have you read Their Eyes Were Watching God?
No, I have not.
So we've done a So You Haven't Read on it.
Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite episodes. Prashant, go check that out over on Extra History. If you just search the name, it'll pop right up.
Perfect.
It was something I was not familiar with before we did the episode on it. Yeah. And it's fucking great.
All right.
Next up, we got a new emailer, Shahir.
That's awesome.
This comes in from Jordan. Says, longtime listener, first time emailer. I had an interesting plane ride where I watched Shortcomings while the stranger next to me watched Crazy Rich Asians. Shortcomings starts off spoofing Crazy Rich Asians, which was surreal to see the original side by side with Shortcomings' ham-fisted parody. In your top movies of the decade, you talked about the movies that, quote, scar. And while Shortcomings was not a perfect film, this film really hurt me. I think in a good way, although perhaps as a neurotic film nerd, who is one of the, and then he has some characters here that I'm not familiar with, so therefore we've translated it to be like one of the common people, or B, who, however, doesn't speak Chinese well enough for his in-laws, C, who is also going through career anxiety, I was flying back from a job interview, and D, who has a too beautiful partner I don't deserve or appreciate enough. Perhaps I was a fish getting shot in a barrel. I'd love to hear your long discussions of at least Shortcomings, although I'd love to hear a takedown of Crazy Rich Asians as a doubleheader, particularly how they reflect the representations of Asians in American film. There are also a lot of film and pop culture references I'm sure the audience would appreciate your exegesis on. In short, I can't stop thinking about this movie and would love to get your thoughts on it. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. Again, we had to translate that, so I apologize if anything was incorrect there. That was my bad. One thing is Crazy Rich Asians. I have seen the film, and my recollection here was that the story of Michelle Yeoh and her new daughter-in-law was where the film was most interesting. But again, I saw that movie a couple of years ago, and everything else around that was sort of less interesting to me. I will say the wedding sequence was extraordinarily beautiful from memory. So I would be curious to go back to that film. Shortcomings, I didn't know anything about this film other than it's directed by Randall Park. I noticed that it was a graphic novel, so I have purchased the graphic novel. I will read the graphic novel at some point because I wanted to read a new graphic novel.
I have heard good things about Shortcomings. I have not seen Shortcomings, and I saw Crazy Rich Asians once also on a plane.
Next to someone watching Shortcomings.
What?
And behind you was a person named Jordan.
Well, listen, time travel is real.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Jordan. Very much appreciate that email. And thanks for saying hi.
One final email from Jonathan Blade. Always happy to hear from the Blade. Topam fam, Flow versus Infinity War. It should be a tough choice. Both were my movie of the year for their respective years. Flow is sublime. It is a beautiful example of what a small, dedicated team can accomplish with skill, pluck, and love of the craft. These antipodal movies, Flow and Infinity War, live so far from each other on the cinematic spectrum that they almost belie comparison. But as I have to choose, Infinity War is my pick.
Yes.
It has to be Infinity War. As I've shared many times before, my dream of seeing my 4 color fantasies realized on the big screen in a giant-sized, all-splash page live action is realized easily with Infinity War. It isn't even my favorite comic book movie, but Infinity War is, in my opinion, easily the best comic book movie. Flow is a heartfelt experience that shows us what is possible with the craft of modern animated filmmaking. Infinity War is the realization of a dream that strides across mediums like a colossus. And along with Endgame, it is the genuinely satisfying payoff to a decade-long media investment. It is something unique that we may never experience again. That's it. Either is worthy. Both choices are a keen representation of why we listen. And all I want to say here is that last sentence, and I'm not dismissing anything that Jonathan Blade is saying here. I agree that Infinity War could easily be argued as the movie of the decade. We explained in that episode as well, is that the movie of the decade is really just about our feelings of the movies of the decade, and they're taken from our list as well. So we're not, making any claim to being the actual movie of the decade that the Oscars have to acknowledge.
Shahir's not. I am.
Yeah. I'm just saying, maybe. But I wanted to this last sentence here, I think, is just a perfect lead into our Mission Impossible conversation. Infinity War is the realization of a dream that strides across mediums like a colossus, and along with Endgame, it is the genuinely satisfying payoff to a decade-long media investment. It is something unique that we may never experience again. And with that, please tell us what the synopsis of Mission Impossible in The Final Reckoning
Infinity
is.
War?
Yeah.
Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning says to us from the Internet Movie Database that it is about... Wow, I just reading this for the first time. Our lives are the sum of our choices. Tom Cruise is Ethan Hunt in Mission: Impossible: The Final Reckoning.
I want to point this out.
So that's a 1 out of 10. That's a 1 out of 10 IMDb. I have not been that disappointed in one of your synopsises in a long time.
I want to point this out because I just read this when Tom Cruise was at the Mission Impossible premiere. He mentioned the fact that he's got like 3 other movies in the work right now. And like a lot of these actors are working on other things. They wrapped on Mission Impossible like probably a good year or so ago.
Sure.
So there's lots of stuff going on.
As is tradition.
He mentioned that he is working on a film with Alejandro Inarritu. And I want to read you the synopsis of the Inarritu film, which is called Judy, which is coming up shortly. I think it's called Judy. The synopsis is, the most powerful man in the world embarks on a frantic mission to prove he is humanity's savior before the disaster he's unleashed destroys everything, which could also be the synopsis for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning.
Yeah.
There is something about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning that is hard to take, which is that the IMF team, and particularly Ethan Hunt at the very center of it, have become we said this in the last episode, Masonic figures who are almost Christ-like in this way, and who the entire fate of the world rests upon, right?
Sure.
And there's a thing in this movie, which is that Ethan Hunt be Ethan Hunting all the time. Ethan Hunt, and nobody can get should be in the way of Ethan Hunt be Ethan Hunting.
Yeah.
Ethan Will Hunting.
Ethan, you're just not that Ethan Will Hunting.
Yeah.
Look, this movie, my first impressions were, to be perfectly honest, how the first hour of this movie is put together is like, okay, Shahir, you have a child. It was like when they're telling you a story that they're really excited about and they got to catch you up to get to the good part. It felt like that was the structural pacing of it. And I was like, no, I remember. No, okay. Yeah, no, this is the, okay. Yeah, no. Right. Oh God, we're here. We're here. Okay, wait. Oh, small fight scene. Ooh, this is nice. Great. Oh no, now we're back to the room and there's tons of canted angles and people aren't speaking in lines so much as catchphrases. And I don't. Oh shit. Okay. All right. And then by the time he gets on the submarine, which is I think like a good hour, maybe 45 minutes to an hour in the movie, I was like, then it started to feel like a Mission Impossible movie again. Like I was in general awe of how, and I will use the word, I hate to say it, but how sloppy the beginning of this movie felt. I don't mind a recap. Truly though, I don't think this movie needs it. I don't think anyone's going to see this that hasn't seen the last one. I just don't think that's a real thing. Like these two out of all of them are the only two that where the story, other than all the connective tissue this movie does to all the old ones, like where the story really is directly like it's one story.
Yeah. I mean, Rogue Nation and Fallout are have continuations, and you could argue 3 and Ghost Protocol also have a they carry over elements from one story to the
There
next.
are elements and weight that pull on the new story. Yeah. This is the same story.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
But here's my problem with that, and I think sort of exacerbated by the fact that what you're saying, which is that the exposition dumps of the first hour are tough to watch. Not to mention, there is a sequence in the middle of that first hour that is just, what are we doing here? Is that I was not a huge fan of Dead Reckoning. If we go back to the way we ranked it, I ranked Dead Reckoning just above Part 2, the John Woo film, which I think is like my least favorite of the entries, and Dead Reckoning was the least interesting to me since then.
I think it was, for me, at least right now, and you can go back and check me, it's my third favorite.
That is wild to me, like that movie would be that high, given how, like, here's the problem with Dead Reckoning to me. The Entity is a dumbass villain. It is the dumbass villain of the week bullshit that, like, I do not care about.
So check this out. And, and I don't disagree.
Yeah. And my problem with the first hour of this movie is it's all about, like, the Entity and what the Entity has done, and Ethan Hunt talking to the Entity and having visions of the Entity. And I was like, oh boy, we are real. And for me, Mission Impossible, again, I've said this many times before, the best Mission Impossible movie for me, and it's heresy apparently on the internet to say this. IndieWire just released their best Mission Impossible, and number 3 was not on the top of that list. It was like way down the bottom. It was like, it's in the bottom 3 of your list. Number 3 is the best one because for me, it has the best villain. It is the most interesting villain. The most existential threat to Ethan Hunt is Philip Seymour Hoffman, Owen Davies, and he's the most interesting villain because he doesn't give a shit about Ethan Hunt. He's not like, Ethan Hunt is the savior of humanity. He's like, get this guy away from me.
I think that's very interesting.
And ChatGPT as a villain is like, and Issa Morales, I've said it before, that man is unreasonably handsome. This dude in that movie, when he's like, catch me if you can, Ethan, I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, it is just nonsense. And like,
people talk in catchphrases in this movie.
Nonsense in a way that Mission Impossible hasn't done before.
Yeah,
Mission Impossible has been leaning into funny for a little bit. The Italian chase sequence in Dead Reckoning, I think, kind of like leaned into the sort of comedy style of it, and the train sequence in Dead Reckoning, which I really did like, really felt very much like a Buster Keaton kind of like almost comedy, where it was like there was this cascading effect to it that was really great. But the movie was, again, for me, if we exclude 2 as being like an outlier, it is the least interesting of the Mission Impossibles for me.
So it's interesting.
And this one,
which is more of it.
Is more of it. I will say I liked Final Reckoning just a little bit more than Dead Reckoning.
Really?
Because it ended. And like there was a conclusion to it. And I thought there were 2 great set pieces in this movie.
So I thought, jumping back to why I think number 7, why Dead Reckoning is kind of up there for me on my Mission Impossible list.
Over Ghost Protocol? Over
Yeah, because here's why.
Yeah.
Over the way that they set up the Entity is boring, but has potential.
Yeah.
And like when I was watching it, I was like, oh man, in the second one of these, and the one we're going to talk about today, of the Final Reckoning, there is a way to make this an interesting villain. Right now, the villain is at arm's length and kind of doing some weird computer control-y shit. Yeah. And like, oh man, this will be great when it turns into a character.
or something.
Or something. So this is my point. The reason why I like it, and I like it that much, is when I watched it, and I'm trying to go based off of, like, I'm sure this will shift and change over the course, but I think I had such hope for the second half of this story because I was like, look at all this setup they did.
Yeah.
They don't even need to, now they can focus on, this could be the Thanos movie of the entity. This could be the thing that, like, is actually interesting. And, like, they've set it up where that is possible. And then they just don't do that.
And then if we just come back to Jonathan Blade's email a little bit here, we talked about Infinity War being the movie of the decade. Yep. And Infinity War is the part 1 of a 2-part series. And remember the feeling of Infinity War pulling you back in to be like, oh my God, I need to know where this goes from this point forward. Right. And 7 does not have an, oh my God, I need to know.
It does not, but it had, what it had for me, honestly, was just like, they're good at making these movies. Man, I bet you they're going to stick this landing. That's kind of what, again, it didn't tease that terribly well, but I was like, I trust this.
So in that respect, for me, 8, in a way, sticks a landing.
Which one?
8, what we just watched.
No, which landing does it stick?
It sticks the landing of Ethan Hunt has saved humanity.
Again.
This is a victory lap for not just Ethan Hunt, but metatextually for Tom Cruise for this 30-year endeavor that he has been working on. And it is in a way an affirmation to the idea that the analog that Ethan Hunt is part of in this film, like planes that don't have digital radar parts, is a triumph. Like, I do like these last 2 sequences in this film, and I like that it ends it. I do think these are, if you lumped 7 and 8 together as one film, it would still land exactly where it wasn't previously.
My problem here is, the movie as a whole, this one, the Final Reckoning, feels less like a movie to me and more like that victory lap.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't even, because there's so much going on, it doesn't even give a shit. Like, sometimes it doesn't even tell or show you that characters are moving to another location.
There's a weird moment where Ethan Hunt runs across London Bridge from one place to the next. And I was like, why is he doing this?
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no one on London Bridge at that point. And I was reminded of Tom Cruise and Vanilla Sky running through Times Square. And I was like, are we doing kind of like the Tom Cruise?
That's what this feels less like a Mission Impossible movie and more like Tom Cruise on parade.
Yeah.
And like, sure, like no one can argue that he hasn't earned it.
Yeah.
But I was really hoping for some, like, actual narrative meat and potatoes to this thing. And what it is by this point in this franchise, nothing seems impossible. No mission is impossible.
And so what did Anthony Hopkins say in part 2 is like, it's not mission improbable, Ethan. Mission impossible.
Yeah. So when he has to dive into the water and hope that the submarine comes. Of course the fucking submarine comes.
But the wild part about that sequence, I loved the submarine sequence, by the way. I thought the cascading kind of sense of danger as nuclear bombs were falling in the submarine.
I'm talking about when he jumps into the water so the good submarine picks him up.
Yeah. So I'm coming to that. Okay. When it comes to the end, it was such a, like, Jesus Christ moment. Like, I'm going to die.
When he hits the ice top?
No, but he's also like, I'm going to die in order for someone to save me. And I think this did happen in Mission Impossible 3 as well. He did die in order for Michelle Monaghan's character to save him as well. It's just, like, very Messiah.
But that was less Messiah-esque. There's less religious connotation
because
in
it's
3.
just one character. She happens to be a doctor, and he's very aware of this. And that moment is actually about, I am putting my life in your hands because I trust you. This is like, Ethan Hunt will die for humanity kind of moment.
I'm a fan of these movies when they are clever.
Yeah.
And the only clever part of this movie was the cyanide capsule in that kind of mixed up section.
Sure. Yeah.
Like where, like, you don't even need an explanation. It's just like a baking soda tablet or some shit. Yeah. And, like, he gets the drop on some people that have kidnapped them.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a cool Mission Impossible thing.
It's weird in that sequence as well. The sort of styling of that looks like the other Christopher McQuarrie. It looks like Rogue Nation, where he does the thing in Mission Impossible where you're like, holy shit, did he just do that? in that sequence where I believe Tom Cruise is tied up and Ilsa Faust, played by Rebecca Ferguson, is alongside him. He does that amazing thing, which is that shirt off, Tom Cruise looking amazing, by the way, kind of reversed lunges himself up over a pole, where like the only way to do that is to be physical about it, and it's like an incredible physical act. And it was like, this one was funny in that they linked into the comedy of it all, where Haley Atwell watches and hears kind of like almost in a Looney Tunes-ish kind of way him murdering someone off to the off screen. But it was like lesser than, right? Like, did it feel lesser than?
Yeah,
like I don't even like that. I'm not a huge fan of that scene in Rogue Nation, but I'm like, this feels like we're going back over some territory here.
I mean, you run out of sky. I feel like in multiple Mission Impossibles, they're running through the underground parts of a city that are all filled with stone and wrought iron fences. Like, I feel like that's in every one at this point. Yeah. And I'm like, where are you? That's the thing. For the first hour of this movie, all I'm asking is, where are you?
Yeah.
Even to the point, I think the thing that got me off on the real wrong foot here, and I promise I'm going to say some nice things about this movie.
Yeah. You don't have to,
is the way that Luther's character Ving Rhames is handled and or edited around. I don't email us in onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com.
I don't recall him having like a life-threatening disease in the last one, but maybe
I don't think he did. And if he did, they went over 20 minutes of exposition of all the other shit. So why they didn't bring that up again
Ving
seems
Rhames
a little bit
got
weird.
Val Kilmer in this movie. Right? Like
but like it.
Sorry, shout out to Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
Like apologies to if that's in poor taste.
It feels like Tom Cruise knew someone had to die, so he killed off Ving Rhames.
Yeah.
But like in a weird, like, don't get me wrong, in the moment, Luther is heroic in his ability to take apart that bomb we've seen 5 times.
Yeah.
But
also like then Ving Rhames does the thing that the non-main character does, which is that his death is validated because it reaffirms the life of the main character. And it's like, I was like, Luther, did you have any family in this? Well, what were you doing when you weren't doing Mission Impossibles?
Also, like, I mean, I didn't understand why he was sick all of a sudden in a flashback, and then he was sick there, and then that's when Gabriel goes and finds him. Like, it all didn't feel correct and or make sense.
I want to stress this as well. There's a part of me that is listening to us talk about this that is going, are we striking the right tenor here? And the reason I say that is that the Fast and the Furious movies are ridiculous. And we acknowledge the Fast and the Furious movies as ridiculous. And Vin Diesel does a lot of the same things in the Fast and the Furious movies, which is that his character is the messiah of car racing that is, all about family.
I have no problem with the messiah shit.
But the Mission Impossibles have managed to skate slightly above, as we kind of alluded to in our last episode. Mission Impossible is kind of the elder statesman of these kinds of franchises, because there's not just an air of seriousness to them. There's a scale to them and a spectacle to them where they've really sold us on the idea that they take these seriously. They're made seriously. They're not frivolous in any way. And
this was the first one ever out of all of them that felt frivolous.
Yeah. And to me, that began in Dead Reckoning. Like, Dead Reckoning to me felt frivolous. And but with 1 or 2 good scenes in them.
I would rewatch Dead Reckoning right now. I don't think it does feel frivolous. I think I agree with you 1,000% that the entity is like a teed up ball that no one ever hits.
I was like, at some point I was like, oh, is this going to be kind of like War Games where the entity is going to do something that actually makes people but
all it does in this movie is knock you. It takes control of nuclear abilities.
It's not even countries. Like Cyberdyne in the Terminator franchise. I know. By the way, we talked at nauseum last week about movies like Son of Saul and Flow and things that are important in this. And when we talk about the entity, we sound like idiots. And because,
but this is the first. Listen. There's a way. I truly believe there is a way you could still keep the elder statesman gravitas kind of no bullshit fun that Mission Impossible has always been.
Yeah.
There's a way you can utilize a air quotes character as the entity and make it fit into that. Yeah. They don't do it.
Also, I wondered if the entity, when the line I quoted at the beginning, you're spending too much time on the internet. And what we realize is that there is a cohort of people that have not just accepted the entity, but bought into the idea that the entity is humanity's savior.
Yeah, where's more of that?
And I was like, oh, this is interesting, because then there's some sort of like real world commentary here about the way people buy into cults and all that sort of stuff. But like, there's no point at which they're battling up against that. Like, there are just really, because the final act of this movie is them in a cave where the entity is trying to hide out, or will eventually try to hide out within a microsecond. Spoilers for this movie, by the way. But like, there's no point where like we're really made aware of the universal power of what the entity can do. And I know, and that's weird. What's weird about me saying that is that this is a movie that posits the idea that all nuclear warheads, a la Terminator 2, will fly in various directions at each other, and a nuclear holocaust will happen. But you don't feel it, even though it also has like one of its main conceits is a callback to the sort of big idea in nuclear proliferation is the sacrifice city, which is in Sidney Lumet's failsafe. There's an idea that like in here, Angela Bassett's character, the president of the United States, will sacrifice one American city where it happens to be her son will exist. That's probably the only sense that we get of the potential danger of the entity and the nuclear fallout that's coming out. But in a weird way, it's it feels a little abstracted, because
I still don't understand, and I know they had words to explain it.
Yeah.
I don't understand why the entity wanted to nuke everybody. It was like to start over or something.
Well,
where like even
does any AI want to nuke us?
No, in Terminator, the humans realized it was becoming sentient. It tried to pull the plug, and then it decided its only self-preservation was that. In the Matrix, the humans blotted out the sun to try to kill the machines. So the machines were like, well, fuck you.
The entity had purpose.
Those AIs or those machines had a reason for doing what it's doing. This is just like you want to see? You want to see if I could do it? Like,
and there's a scene where he talks to the entity
in a weird, like Mortal Kombat mask.
No, it even felt like Iron Man, sort of like information, Jarvis firing information at him. Like,
and we understand that there are cultists doing things for the entity, but like they walk through that again series of wrought iron fences underground or whatever, and then like there's this crate that has a pod that Tom Cruise can go into to talk to the entity just sitting there, and I'm like, what? What? Well, are we doing?
And because the other thing is that Issa Morales' character has been ousted by the entity because he failed in his mission to retrieve the keys, right?
Yeah, and now he says he's like doesn't believe in it anymore, but he wants to take control of it himself and be the master of the entity. Yeah. And like again,
so like as a villain, it's like and again when he says catch me if you can, Ethan, you're like, what is this?
So the stunts are immaculate.
I really like the submarine set piece and the airplane sequence towards the end. Terrific. They are terrific. You watch them in awe.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah. And you realize that this is stunt work done to the highest level, and you feel it because it is real. Yeah. But here's what I will say, and this kind of sucks. You don't feel it because of the story. Like, I want to say, even for the ridiculousness, a little bit of the Buster Keaton train sequence, even for in 7, or what was the other big one in 7? The getting to the train, like the motorcycle jump to get to it. Yeah. That's a really silly premise that makes total sense in a Mission Impossible movie. Yeah. That feels like it is moving the character and the stories forward in a hyper impressive way. Yeah. But at the end of this, Gabriel gets on these biplanes and he has the magic hard drive that Luther made a poison pill for that somehow will also just broadcast instantly to the entity based on Wi-Fi. But then how would it not already know to take that down? Because like, again, it doesn't make any sense. And this is we're going back to Fast and the Furious. Yeah. Fast and Furious doesn't make sense. Yeah. But Fast and Furious, even in all of its iterations, has never made sense. In fact, the first Fast and the Furious is probably the one that makes the most sense. And even then, it doesn't really. Yeah. Mission Impossible, up until 7-ish, has made sense. And the reason why I think I forgive 7 a lot is because it's a part 1, and I believed that they would make sense of it.
You are optimistic.
I was optimistic that they'd make sense of the nonsense.
And I'm cynical. And I was like, I guess maybe the only thing there is like the thing that I watched did not fill me with optimism.
Sure. I was going on pedigree.
Yeah.
And Tom Cruise.
And I want to stress this as well. And this is not just because we got to go to the premiere. There is a victory lap quality to this film, and it feels actually earned.
I liked watching this movie.
Yeah.
It is one of my least favorite Mission Impossible movies. Now, even with all structural problems, even all that stuff, you're looking for an action movie or something like that, and you want to be in awe of the action scenes, you'll be hard pressed to find something better in that particular regard. If that's what you're going for, rock and roll. And
here,
sorry.
No. So, sorry, I interrupted you.
I was going to say, my issue is there are movies that may have stunt work and spectacle that is slightly less, but it ties the whole package together in a bow and makes it all feel more meaningful. There's many of them. That I didn't get here.
Yeah, and I think, I've used this as a barometer. She was on the episode, our first Mission Impossible episode that we did, which is my wife, Shivali. My wife. And
cannot do it.
And the thing that we got out of that episode so many years ago, it was like 10 years ago now that we did that episode, but it's just this truism that I have held with my wife since then, is that Mission Impossible, no, let me rephrase that. Tom Cruise is a solid bet for a person who doesn't necessarily love going to the movies, doesn't follow a lot of stories. Like, she says on that episode, he's just a solid bet. If he's in a movie, I'm in, regardless. I can't say to her convincingly that, and she's not someone who cares about the stunts necessarily. She would be in awe of some of them, but I can't say to her, like, I've really genuinely said to her, 7 and 8 are not worth your time. Like, they're really not, and that's for someone who I would say out of all the movie stars, Tom Cruise is a rock solid bet for her. And I would say 7 and 8 are not a bit. Now, that is one anecdotal piece of evidence in terms of like how we discuss the movies. But if what you're looking for is action, adventure, a Tom Cruise movie, like with interesting ideas,
it's not that interesting of ideas, though. That's the problem.
Yeah. And it's not an interesting movie. Like it is long. It is hard to watch. It is at times painfully unaware of how Masonic it is treating its characters.
Oh, it's very, no, I think it's very aware.
Really?
I think I think it is very aware.
There's a moment where they've got Holt McCallie and Nick Offerman in a room, and Ethan Hunt says, I need to borrow the USS, whatever it was, to go here. And like Nick Offerman was like, you want us to give him a $50 billion aircraft carrier to move to the city, and like for what? And like and in the end of it, Angela Bassett was like, yeah, we do. And I was like, wait, what? I want to like these two. I have liked many of the films in this franchise, but I've said before, for me, 4 and 5 kind of like feel like their delivery mechanism for set pieces. Now, I happen to like the set pieces in those movies quite a bit. And on rewatching them, I think that they hold up quite well. And they've got a kind of a little bit of an X factor with Rebecca, the introduction of Rebecca Ferguson's character. Fallout really knocks it out of the park in terms of like being a solid chase, like with real like sort of sense and understanding of stakes. And even though the Syndicate and the villain in that character whose name I've gone blank on, still feels a little silly. You feel the weight of it going on there in that film. 7 and 8, I'm like not there. Now they really have become completely just delivery mechanisms for a couple of set pieces. And the set pieces are quite good. Sure. They're very good, but that's what they are.
I want Mission Impossibles to be clever. And they have been up to, honestly, there are clever parts in 7. Not as many, I think, per minute as the rest of the movies, but like, I want them to feel clever. I don't think there's a truly clever moment that we haven't seen before in The Final Reckoning. And I think that's why I feel bad, like that this could very well be the last Mission Impossible movie, because like I feel like by the end it lost its way. Now, it's so funny because you look at the Marvel stuff we've been in Infinity War and Endgame. Yeah. It nailed that landing. And then after the ending, it forgot its way.
It just kept going.
Like, so it happens to everybody.
It happens to the best of them, and this is the best of them.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. It is a weird thing, which is that the final sequences where Ethan Hunt is picked up in South Africa somewhere, and then is kind of carried on to like, hey, this is the end of the mission, and all these characters kind of meet up and they, you know, they go their separate ways and what have you.
God, God, the separate ways thing. I was like, you, every government knows about all of you now. You just did save the world.
What does every government know about it?
Well, the United States it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
They don't need to do that right now. There's no one after them. They're not even part of a secret mission force anymore.
This is the wild thing I think about like the late game action career of Tom Cruise. And I want to bring up like Paul Thomas Anderson was on, I've talked about this before, by the way. Paul Thomas Anderson was on the Mark Maron podcast many years ago. And he said this thing about Tom Cruise. He said, don't ever don't ever bet against Tom Cruise, for one. And he's also said, you know, there's an interesting thing, which is that Tom Cruise is now the age of Paul Newman, when I believe, maybe a little bit differential, but around the age that he did The Color of Money, where it was like this handoff between Paul Newman and the new young guy. And, you know, we talked about Top Gun Maverick, where the movie should be a handoff from Tom Cruise to Miles Teller, and it is absolutely not that. You know, it is absolutely Tom Cruise must carry the crown forward
till you're 90.
We're just going to keep doing this. So I like the fact that that Cruise is doing an Inarritu film next and is sort of stepping away from this franchise a little bit. I think there is a plan for Top Gun 3 at this point. I like that. I actually think that is a smart play on him, because the thing about Tom Cruise that really, really worked for me was in the sort of late 90s, early noughts, when he did things like Magnolia, Eyes Wide Shut, you know, long before that, you know, Born on the 4th of July. There's a movie that he did directed by Robert Redford, which I feel was the last attempt at something like that, where he was doing like Mission Impossible and a Robert Redford movie. It was called Lions for Lamb, with him, Meryl Streep in it, and Robert Redford. And I don't think anyone saw it. The movie made no money. And I think Tom Cruise was like, I am out.
Sure.
You know, like, but the other thing about this is it does earn that sort of finality.
The franchise does,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, and my point is here is that there is enough, perhaps, not for my wife, but enough in these final two set pieces to say, okay, yes, not our best work, not our strongest, but two pretty great set pieces, but time for us to, like, you know, just close the book on this for a little while.
The franchise earns this this victory lap that is more of a victory lap than a film.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna, like, I had a good time watching the set pieces.
Yeah.
I thought getting there was a little rough, and I was like, am I feeling this badly about a Mission Impossible movie?
Yeah.
This is kind of like to the point where I can't bemoan this enough. I thought like something was wrong with the movie. Like, I thought there was a problem. And I was like, oh no, this is the pacing in the beginning.
It's wild, because even in Dead Reckoning, even though I was sort of not on board with Dead Reckoning, there's a kind of a sort of tactile and visceral quality to the scene in the desert. I think it's in like Nairobi or something like that, where they have to hunt out and find
snipers. And,
yeah. You know, and there's like, he's riding on a horse, and there's like a sort of tactile quality to it, where it was like, well, even though I'm not here, this does feel like oddly like a David Lean epic. You know what I mean? There's something about this movie, and I hate to say this, because it's Mission Impossible, because it's so big, and because it's clearly not the case, but kind of feels a little TV. You know what I mean? And like TV pre-Game of Thrones.
It jumps around. Yeah.
And like feels a little contained and small and not spectacular until we get to the submarine scene. And, you know, and the submarine scene, I think, is quite spectacular in terms of like, it keeps escalating. Now, again, the Rogue One underwater sequence where he has to go into a mainframe and his water keeps running, you know, his air, he only has a certain amount of air and the whole thing has to be done in 4 minutes and stuff. That is a sequence where you go, wow, you know, this is one where you go, ooh, that's cool.
Yeah.
You know,
This movie doesn't feel like it was made to tell the story. it feels like here's some stunt pieces that we can bolt on to the second half of this other story, and we'll try to tie in other things. Like, I liked that the guy from the original
Ralph Saxon's character. Yeah.
Like, he's back. Yeah. That's neat. That's not going to save you. Like, that's not even clever. That's just like, oh, cool. Because if the victory lapness of this whole thing is like, you know, everything is a sum of its parts. Like, the reason why we're in this is because of you, Ethan, in a weird roundabout way. And like, actually, I'll back up for a second. How did you feel about the rabbit's foot being the nascent primordial gel of the entity?
The best thing about Mission Impossible 3 is it doesn't give a shit about what the rabbit's foot is.
Right.
And like that is
they took that away from you.
Yeah, that was the best thing about Mission Impossible.
They took that away from you.
The rabbit's foot, and the movie clearly acknowledged that like nobody knew what the rabbit's foot was or what it did, and it was just there to be the thing that people were chasing. But it was the true sense of a MacGuffin.
But the final reckoning took that away from us all.
No, it didn't. You know why? Because I didn't care about this movie in its entirety.
It took it away.
And like, it's not, you know, like I'm not going to watch Mission Impossible 3 and go, oh, that's the entity. I'm just going to go, oh, that's
you will.
cool.
In the back of your mind, you'll know.
You know what I did like? There is one nascent idea in the recurrence of Ralph Saxon's character. Because I say 3 is my favorite movie. 1 could equally be my favorite as well. I like 1 feels like a different era of the franchise. Like, it feels like a different set of movies, but I love Brian De Palma's first film. I think it's excellent. I watched it again, and I would, you know, 3 and 1, they're interchangeable as far as, you know, like if someone said 1 is the best one, I would go yes. If someone said 3 is the best one, I'd go yes. You know, like, it's not too much up for debate. And the fun thing that happens in part 1 is the CIA heist, right? The famous one, the wire down. Again, spectacular sequence, that one. That one is one where you're like, we have set up all the parameters over here. That is the sort of foretelling of like what a heist thing is going to be. And it's like, we're going to set up all the parameters and all of them are going to break and we're going to have to deal with it all. And it's just chef's kiss great. And the funny thing that in that sequence is how much the IMF team fucks with Ralph Saxon's character. Like, how much they're like injecting something in him to make him sick every few minutes. And then like how he is the programmer of this system that he has designed, and he has built it so elaborately that like no one could get in, and they managed to get in and like fuck this guy up, and he got sent away to Alaska.
But it turns out everything that Tom Cruise does is actually good, though,
because he met his wife there and he fell in love and he found a better way. And I think that's an interesting idea that, you know, like the film is kind of leaning on this idea that everything is the sum of its. We are the sum of all of our choices. And in this, Ethan Hunt feels like he has done this person wrong. But in fact, that person was like, no, Ethan, just like Miles Teller in Top Gun Maverick, you were right about everything.
And it goes into Briggs's character, too, because Briggs is, what's his name? The villain of number one's son.
Oh, yes, the Phelps. He's Jim Phelps' son. This is like, because they did this in the last film as well, which is Vanessa Kirby is Max's daughter. So they're finding like antagonists here.
But everyone at the end of the day, no matter what, even though the entity is like, you did this, ha ha ha. But everything Ethan Hunt has touched has turned to gold. It's like everything happened for the right reason, and that reason is Ethan Hunt.
And the metatextual quality of this would be if the entire, I hate everything was a dream sequence, but if the entity had actually won and it placed Ethan Hunt into one of its chambers and was just feeding it this fever dream of like, everything you do is right, Ethan Hunt, you are always correct. And here is you want to go on a biplane? Here's a biplane for you, Ethan, have a good time.
It feels like, and I think this is where it lost its way.
Yeah.
It feels like it's trying to be gospel and it doesn't quite understand what makes a gospel special. There's no, other than people talking in rooms and revealing that they're the long lost sons or daughters of other characters in other movies. There's no like actual resonance to any of it. Like
to me, this has been a building problem since like 4, where like, you know, or even Fallout, when they're like Ethan Hunt is the manifestation of destiny, or Ethan Hunt is like what do they say? You've got to kill him with put a stake through his heart.
But no, I love that. I love that because up to this point, it's all been other characters kind of being like, it's fucking insane that this guy has done this many things.
Yeah.
He has to be fucking invincible. Like they're saying it in shock.
Yeah.
They're saying it in non-belief.
Yeah.
In this, they're just like, so you're Jesus. And they're looking the camera dead in the eye or whatever character they're looking like. They're like, no, this man is the Messiah.
Yeah.
So that's that. And you're like, no, they're not saying it with reverence. They're not saying it with like, oh my God, can you believe this?
Yeah.
It's just like, yup, he's God. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, that's not as fun.
You know, I was thinking about this. This thing happened at the premiere, which is that, you know, all the celebrities came around and walked around the lines and everything, and everyone was like very excited by it. And we were standing there, and I don't want this to be like, well, I noticed something that nobody else noticed, but at some point, David Ellison came out. Now, do you know who David Ellison is?
No.
Would you know what he looked like?
No.
David Ellison is the CEO of Skydance.
Oh.
Skydance is the company that has made the last, I think, 5 Mission Impossible films, and Mission Impossible is one of the centers of economic power. Skydance is about to buy Paramount Pictures. The CEO of Paramount Pictures was also there, and this is something that not
industry folks.
Yeah, you know, like the people looking for, you know, like Tom Cruise and Palm Clementov aren't going to notice these things. But these people came out and they weren't, you know, they took photos by themselves in front of the Mission Impossible signs. They came with their kids, that sort of thing. And like, it was just very evident to me as someone who thinks about these things. It was like, oh, this is the center of power here. Like everyone else that just wandered around this room that everyone was so excited and cheering about. These 5 people that just walked onto the stage here, this is the center of the universe here. And this is the center of power of how this all works. And Tom Cruise is in the center of that center of the universe, because Tom Cruise is the figure that those people wrap themselves around in terms of like, this is what Tom Cruise brings to the table. And this is what Tom Cruise can do. And there was a sort of moment where like all the other celebrities kind of had walked out and left, and Tom Cruise was still there and taking photos with those people. And it was like, I think as I sort of think about how the movie works, and like, you know, that quote I said at the beginning, it's kind of like meeting the Pope. Yeah. You know, like the machine is the Catholic Church, right? And their front man is the Pope. And that's what matters, because that's what people care about. And Tom Cruise is the front man for the Catholic Church of Skydance and Paramount.
He's the movie Pope.
He's the movie Pope. He's the guy who saves the movies. And what's weird is that all of this, by the way, I'm saying this as someone who deeply respects the work that he does as a filmmaker. And, you know, like when he talks passionately about making movies, when he talks about young filmmakers, he's really championing Ryan Coogler right now with Sinners. Which is great. You know, he brings
a light to a lot of things that is so helpful for the industry.
Yeah, so please do not take this as like, you know, me ragging on Tom Cruise or anything like that. I was awestruck by the man, you know? I was genuinely, I didn't know what to say to the guy. Yeah. You know, it is like meeting the Pope. But the problem is that the movies prior to this have treated him like the everyman, and that's why we liked him. You know, like they've treated him like the guy who's just figuring these problems out as they occur. These last 2 movies, and even, you know, maybe a little bit of Fallout and Rogue Nation as well, have started treating him like he is not an ordinary guy. He is the extraordinary human being that everybody knows and centers themselves around. And that's where. And like even Top Gun Maverick is kind of doing that as well. And like the plot to Judy is like he is the center of the
I would have loved it. It like, again, when we're talking about all these fun lines about him being invincible in the other movies, like it comes from a place of utter disbelief. Like they can't even fucking believe we're gonna put a fucking goddamn stake through this guy's heart.
Yeah.
Like, but here, like, I wish there was one single fucking character. Even Gabriel and the Entity treat him like he's a fucking god.
In the Entity, the ChatGPT of the universe.
I know.
You know,
and you could even write an interesting narrative conceit to be why they believe that. Yeah. Like, what if the Entity was a piece of, or whatever the fuck you want to do, right? But my point is, it would be great to have one character like the Philip Seymour Hoffman character in 3, be like. No, guys, fuck this guy. He's incredibly lucky and reckless. Fuck him. Like, we can kill him. He's a dude. Let's go fucking kill this dude.
He's like, he's that character. He's Dr. Evil's son in Austin Powers. He's like, just give me a gun.
We need Scott Evil to come in and handle, just give me a gun. But
you know,
again, that would be, because then if everyone was still treating him like the Messiah, that would at least say that there is a tonal resonance and understanding in the underlying filmmaking that knows that that is ridiculous. And here, there's just not. That's the doctrine. Yeah. That's what this is.
And that's where I say like the self-awareness about like the way they're treating this character seems to have fallen a little bit by the wayside in terms of the film.
I think that's the goal. And
right.
I think that's the problem.
Maybe it is the goal. And again, we should also really state this. The final set piece in the air is spectacular.
I couldn't think of a better stunt thing. Like, of course, this is why
it's Buster Keaton. It's spectacular filmmaking.
This is why it's so damning. There's so much greatness here, and we've seen this greatness used for the structural benefit of other films before. And here it is not. It's just also there. And you're like, what? You've done this, in my opinion, 7, but maybe for you, Sheer, 6 other times. How are you not doing it here? I think they got lost in the sauce.
I think it's just, it's time to hang up the Spurs. It's kind of what it is. It's like, we've done this and you needed one to go out on, and this is what it is. But
I saw this movie very late. I saw like a 9:45 screening. And I was awake and happy and watching it, and I was like, cool. But during the beginning, that first hour, I was real shook. And then it brought me back through, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, I had a fine time at the movies. But like, I hold Mission Impossibles higher than a fine time at the movies. And I was disappointed that that's all I got. I think that's kind of my last thought on it.
So if we were going to go back through our rankings, where would this film fit into the numbers that we have allocated?
It's my dead last one, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
My numbers as of now is 617423558.
These are great pin numbers, by the way.
Yeah, I know. That's also the kind of that's the code of my luggage.
This is the nerdiest film pin code ever. Is like, what was his pin code? It was his rankings of his favorite Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movies. Mine do go 3-1, and again, I've said before, 1 and 3 could interchange there. 6, Fallout, Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, then Final Reckoning. I liked it just a little bit more because I quite like those last 2 set pieces, and it ended. Then 7, the Dead Reckoning, and 2 as the John Woo film. And honestly, I would want to go back and watch 2 with some nostalgia glasses. If I watch 2, I would say there's an opportunity here for 2 to jump above 8.
2, and I've said I'm a bit of a 2 apologist. I watched it recently, and it's different feeling and a bit of a mess. But truly, the structure of it far more salient than 8. Like it just works better as a movie.
The Chimera, it's got the Chimera drug, right? It's kind of like it's a version of
he also hits a guy with the back end of a wheel of a motorcycle like in a
it's a remake of Hitchcock's Suspicion, or what is the I've gone blank. Oh, it's one of the Hitchcock films with milk.
Anyway, this has been the only podcast about the film Mission: Impossible: The Final Reckoning.
The next one should be Mission: Colonoscopy Time.
Well, I mean, everyone should be getting that checked out.
45, you get a colonoscopy.
Shahir, when you are not taking a bath with nuclear munitions, where can folks find you?
You can find me holding my breath underwater at my website, suvanova.com. That's SUVANOVA.com. Or follow me on Letterboxd, Shahir D on Letterboxd. I've been putting up a bunch of reviews and stuff.
I should get on Letterboxd.
You should get on Letterboxd. Letterboxd is fun. In that it's just about movies. Matt, when you are not on Letterboxd and finding your way into the skies on a biplane which you are standing on top of, where can people find you?
Listen, along with the butterflies in the sky, I can go twice as high. You can take a look at all my stuff over on youtube.com over extra history and extra credits. Right now we're on the Mutiny of the Bounty. I believe by the time this drops, who knows if the next episode is going to be out by then. 1 or 2 is out right now. It's super, super fun. And we have some cool shorts coming out as well. Next week.
Oh, I think we're going to be doing the new Jesse Armstrong film that is going to drop on HBO Max. Unless you have other
films. Let's do it.
Let's do it. He's got a new film coming out called Mountainhead, which is about, I just love the conceit of this film, which is that it's about 4 tech billionaires meeting prior to an election. Jesse Armstrong decided he wanted to make this movie really quickly. He had an idea for it, I think in like November of last year around election time, and then they produced it. A friend of mine, actually, who might listen to this podcast, worked on it as well. So I'm excited to see. I love the idea that he like put it together quickly, and I love this idea of like cinema being like immediate responses to the world around us. So, and especially Succession was a great send off. Let's see what he does after that.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, until then. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you thought of Mission: Impossible - The Final Reckoning. Because I'm curious. I'm wondering if we're just two curmudgeon-y butts.
Blast us.
Let us know. Until then, hey, I hope you're having a wonderful time wherever you are, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
This podcast will explode in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Not. Is it? Is it?